Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. How are my peeps doing? Welcome aboard. Bridge MCP, Melanie Keelan, Eric Hayes, and of course, AVQ. El Señor y el Único, Michael Rudden. How are you doing today, my friends? Great to see everybody in the house. People are still chiming in. How is everything going? I trust all is fine. Grassley Johnson share investigative material with prosecutors on Hunter Biden. You're still on the Hunter kick. Tom C. is in the house. Eric Hayes is in the house. Tom says, inside and on board after pushing a ton of Michigan leaves into the woods. Good composting, good by making the woods a composter for you. I think that's a good thing, Tom C. Very good. All right, let's see what else we got here. Michael Rudnan says, I just got home from away. Been a busy week. Expecting a call to go anytime now. Whoa, you must be busy, bright brother. You must be busy. Anyway, we got a lot of videos for you today, some of which are going to make some of you real happy, like Bridge MCP. I kind of edited that video that we did with the Medicare Advantage because I think it's very informative. So I'm going to play that one. I'll probably play that one second. I also want to play the one with the stroke that we did with Ashley at the KPFT studios, where we discussed Fetterman's stroke and how Oz dealt with it. Then, of course, we're going to talk about Katie Porter. Katie Porter has some good stuff that Democrats better heed. And also, we're going to talk about the economist Stephanie Rule. Actually, it's a crime. This one was crime that Stephanie Rule did that I think everybody should heed. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my baby, with what Ashley had to say about the Fetterman case, because it's sort of hit home. So let's go ahead and start with that video while more people chime in. So let's get busy. Yesterday, we had a debate between Fetterman and Dr. Oz, okay? And if you watch Fetterman was struggling to speak because Fetterman had a stroke. And when he had the stroke, we were all concerned. The one thing I noticed is that there was no cognition issues with Fetterman. And you watched the stroke, and you actually did a TikTok about the stroke because you're a sufferer of 2 strokes. Go ahead. Yes,
I felt very strongly the criticism he was receiving, because my cognition was put into question if I was able to handle the rigor and the responsibility of being a medical student.
Right.
And which rightfully so, it's a different situation, but it's the same kind of setup. And what could be said is also that his cognition didn't seem to be impaired. His delivery might have been, which happens, but his cognition wasn't impaired. And so what saddened me is that they were saying essentially that his disability would make him unfit for office. And people threw out many examples. FDR was paralyzed. Someone even brought in Moses, had a speech impediment. There's many different quote unquote leaders of this country who have disabilities, and saying that someone is not capable of doing a job because of that disability is a a prejudice. It's against them.
It's interesting because after watching you on your first stroke, your first stroke was mild in the effort, but the second stroke was massive, and the swelling in the brain and all of that really had you were. And I want to be nice about this, but you understand your dad misses some things. You were like out of your mind, and I was concerned and speaking to the doctors or whatever, and they assured me that when your swelling was down, these things would have changed. Okay, and they did. So we actually could present an empathy for Brother Fetterman because Fetterman he didn't go through something that I hadn't seen proper. I think, folks, though, it's deeper than just Ashley having had 2 strokes or Fetterman having a stroke. It's more of as far as a society. How do we deal with people? How do we instruct people? What's the requirements of people? Yesterday, I saw an unempathetic person debating Mr. Fetterman, who should have known better. I have the right to not know whether my daughter was going to come back, her mind come back. Would she remember everything she learned in medical school? I have that right because I don't know. I am not a doctor. But Dr. Oz is a doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
He's a medical doctor, and he understood what that means. What was your take on that?
Well, I didn't see it, but I was checking some of the buildup to it, and I've been watching Pennsylvania, as many of you have. But Oz made a public statement before the debate that he's sympathetic to the medical issue and knows it well, and is very sympathetic towards Mr. Fetterman. And that he was willing. I'll paraphrase. He said something like, "I'm willing to make any compensatory adjustments to allow him to be more participative in this debate, like having the little monitors, having closed captioning, being slower in his response."
That's condescending.
But exactly, it was a very condescending attitude I saw coming from Oz, and I appreciate what you shared, Ashley, because you have lived it. We watched your dad live it through you, and saw just the trauma that he was dealing with on your behalf, running off and being just worried, unceasingly. And we're just so happy that you are so participative and so here with us now. It's a great joy to have you in the house here at your radio station.
Absolutely.
With your dad.
Absolutely.
Yes, but speaking of Dr. Oz, I just saw one other thing about him. Mind you, he's not my favorite person, but he stated during the debate that, abortion, on his stance on abortion, that it should be between a woman, her doctor, and the local political leaders. And I find that very bizarre. A local political leader,
what does
they have nothing to do with it. They weren't in the bedroom. They weren't in the hospital room. They weren't in the birthing room. It has nothing to do with them. And it's very draconian, in my opinion. And it's very controlling.
Yes, it is.
It gives a big brother vibe to me, and that was very disappointing, especially coming from somebody who went through medical training and understands that abortion is not choosing to kill a child or a fetus. There are a lot of different situations that it will come, that abortion comes up in. You have the miscarriages, you have ectopic pregnancies, you have, high risk twin pregnancies that will definitely kill the mother. We have a lot of those things, and that isn't being taken into consideration
at all.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to. And that is so true. What Ashley had to say there with abortion. Now, interested. Hey, thank you for calling out Ashley, my dear beautiful Yvette Avery Herod. We did that yesterday at the studio, and I thought there was enough content there with both on both the abortion issue and the stroke issue that I wanted to get played for our internet audience as well. So I'll let her know that you gave her a shout out, Yvette. Okay, let's see. Before I go to the next video, what we got here. Eric says, question isn't the more coverage media-wise, justice served. Darrell Brooks found guilty on all 76 counts in Waukesha Christmas parade murders ending weeks-long lull. I think that's good. But again, we can talk, again, if you look at all the murders that occur in the United States, you would have a tendency, you would, based on which one gets coverage, you would think murder, etc., has a different hue than what really is the majority of murders. But again, because you have been predisposed to see things a particular way, Eric, you think that there's some magical reason that Brooks's conviction didn't get coverage. You know how many convictions occurred on that same day as well? I suggest you check. Anyhow, let's see. Let's see what else we got. Fetterman does not. Oh, I believe, by the way, yes, I know every stroke is different. Ashley had a very peculiar one that was created by a deformity in her brain, something called a arterial venous malformation, which is a whole bunch of veins form a ball without capillaries that increase blood pressure, susceptible as you age to pop, and hers popped. They radiated that. After they radiated that, those vessels died. And the idea is you hope that when those vessels die, that the blockage that it creates won't cause enough of a back pressure to pop before, give a final pop or anything like that. Well, she wasn't that lucky in that she knew exactly when that ball actually collapsed, because it was the day that she had gained back about 80% of her vision. And in 1 second, she went back to 50% of her vision. And we think that is when all the blood flow stopped going through that section of her brain, which got rid of the sight and also worsened her left side paralysis or semi-paralysis. Not all her muscles are paralyzed on her left side. And we think that's when it happened. But after that back pressure stopped, it actually bled again, and that bleeding is what put us in the that is what really almost killed her. Her swelling was horrendous. She was 8 days in ICU, and I don't want to relive that. That was crazy. That was very, very tough. Anyhow, going back onto it, we got Yvette. Thank you for being here. We also have para ver who just came in. Lee Grant says, hi all, getting ready to rumble. We can't trust Fetterman. He flip-flops on fracking. He had to flip-flop on fracking, man. Fracking could have taken him out. The truth of the matter is this, right? He's from Pennsylvania. We don't want fracking. I think until he brings most of Pennsylvanians around, what can I say, right? You have to win the fight. Sometimes you have to compromise, and I think that's what that was. Good afternoon from Maywood, he says, and now officially a pin cushion must have been stuck by several needles. A lot of blood, eh? All right, let's see. Maywood says, okay, that's not for you. Lee Grant says, murder and violent crime are higher in some communities than others. Okay. But, since you brought that up, I think you gave me ample opportunity to point out something, because a lot of people, the Republicans should never have been allowed to run away with the crime message, because they are responsible for much of the increase in crime. I repeat, Republican politicians with their policies are most responsible for the increase in crime. And that is a message that should have been carried from back in 2021, as Carville said several times, but it wasn't. Let's go ahead and play that video, and then we'll take it on the other side. Here's another important message on crime from a scientifically done study. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
In the spring of 2021, when I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal saying the Democrats need to own the crime issue, or the crime issue will own you. Well, people said, well, you can't do that because there'll be a big backlash. Okay, you didn't own it, and guess what? It's a big problem for Democrats.
We're seeing crime spikes in some areas of 60%.
Soaring crime.
We're in the top 10 for crime
in the nation.
The crime wave that's been facilitated by left radical policies.
Restoring crime, DAs that let violent criminals out on the street to roam free. We need to make our streets safe again.
There you have it. Crime is one of the key things Republicans are hammering their opponents with in the final days before the midterms. But they are something those Republicans are not telling voters. The crime they're scaring voters with, a lot of it is happening in their own red backyards. Jim Kessler's organization, Third Way, published a study titled The Red State Murder Problem. He's also a former legislative and policy director for Chuck Schumer. Jim, your study's title says a lot. So let's begin with the facts about murder rates. Walk us through it.
Well, the murder rate in Trump voting states is 40% higher than the murder rate in Biden voting states. 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in the country not only voted for Trump in 2020, they voted Republican in every single presidential election this century. And we looked at the size of police departments in the 25 largest Democratic-run cities and the 25 largest Republican-run cities. On a per capita basis, police departments in Democratic-run cities are 75% larger.
Broaden this out. Overall crimes in red states compared to blue states. I pause because just hearing you say that, it just makes me wonder, why aren't others saying this all day, every day?
Right. And we put this report out in March, and the hope was really to change this narrative. And, look, you had James Carville talking about this 3 minutes ago on this segment. And he's right. If Democrats don't own the crime issue and don't define it, it'll be owned for them. And, I just think Democrats have been derelict telling the story, and Republicans have been telling a far more, it's not a true story, but it's a convincing story. And, we're paying the price for it.
But isn't that crazy? Paul Krugman has a column out right now, and it refers to red delusions about purple reality. And he basically is saying that these right wingers, they talk about all these bad things, but they offer no solutions. How is it that voters don't see this?
Yeah, I think particularly on crime, there's a laziness in the media, frankly, about crime. There's 60 murders that happen typically every single day. And the question is, what murder is going to be covered? And it's usually going to be a murder in a city near a media market like New York or Los Angeles or Oakland, someplace like that. The fact of the matter is the murder capital of California for 5 years running is Kern County. The biggest city there is Bakersfield. That is a Republican-run city, a Republican-run county, and they get to call their Congressman Kevin McCarthy. So, I just think this is an issue that's very easy to demagogue. And again, I would say Democrats have stepped on it themselves. Defund the police was really dangerous words to put out there. Mainstream Democrats didn't come out and squash it right away, and Republicans were allowed to control the narrative.
So right now, there's 2 weeks to go. What do Democrats do? I mean, the fact that you just laid out there that the highest murder rate is in Bakersfield, and the person to point to is Kevin McCarthy, the same person who goes on Fox News every day railing against Biden and crime. It's McCarthy's issue. Do Democrats have time to make that issue? And why haven't they yet? You could pick up the phone and call Chuck Schumer and say, yo, Chuck, why aren't you handling this?
Well, I don't know if there's time left. I mean, this is, if I could take a time machine and go back 6 months, I would try and convince them even harder than I did back then that you've got to control this issue. 2 weeks is a short time, but we need to be doing something on this. Republicans are hammering us on this message. And then we have to look past November and make sure we get control of it in 2024, because this will be an issue that will bedevil us in a presidential year as well.
The truth matters, but only if you hear it. And so people deserve to hear it.
Again, Carville was right. You have to hold absolutely every attack that the Republicans use against Democrats by the horns, and remember what Republicans are best for. It is something called projection. In other words, if they're accusing you of something, hold up a mirror, because it really is talking about what they're doing. They complain about crime. Crime is rampant in their domain. They complain about morality of the progressives and the liberals. It is they who have continuously shown moral degradation, whatever the word is. They complain about economics. It is their policies that continuously hurt the American middle class and poor. They complain about inflation. It is their benefactors who continue to raise prices on us all. They talk about socialism. It is their companies that constantly bleed, or rather suck on the dollars from the American people, from our tax system. So everything they talk about, absolutely everything they talk about, put up a mirror, because it is it can only be called projection. We spend a lot of time remember that it can only be called projection. So Eric, when Eric made us, when presented with the facts, right? We have our two brothers from the right. One, Lee Grant, my good friend Lee Grant, says this stat that progressives tout is just an artifact of population density. Per capita is not based on population density, and that's why you do it per capita. Let me give an example. If there are 100,000 people in a city, and you go ahead and just say that city had 100 murders, but you go ahead and get a city with 50,000 people and say that city had 75 murders. That city that's 50,000 big only had 75 murders. It's more murderous than, or rather, that big city is more murderous than the other. No, it's not. Because if you look at the population and then you look at the murder rate, you need to do all these things on a per capita basis. That, when you guys talking about poverty, you never mind talking about on a per capita, because it turns out POCs on a per capita basis are poorer, and because they're poorer and have other issues, there is more on a per capita basis crimes, etc. Because again, they are poorer. And that's what happened, and that's a socioeconomic problem. And you guys are never scared of touting that. But when we tout about violence created by policy, and we do it on a per capita basis like this study does, everybody will start to quote, well, that's an artifact of population. It's not an artifact of population. There is a reason why red states are much more violent than blue states. And that's because of the gun laws. That is because of the types of law. I think that's because of the laws that allow people to kill. It's that simple. Let's be frank. Republican policies induce violence. And, that the Democrats have allowed these guys to jump on the bandwagon. Violent crime has increased. Yeah, in your neighborhood. Mostly in your neighborhood. Mostly in places where you have allowed guns to go unfettered. Democrats, open your mouth. And for those, when Eric says you can spew per capita all you want, but results are dead people. Look at bond issue. You see, you change the subject. If we didn't have the crazy gun laws, the bond issues would not be an issue at all. And by the way, the laws are written in Austin by Republicans in our state, in Texas. So please consult your Republican policymakers and ask them, why don't they pass laws that judges can enforce? Come on now. Again, you get bad information from dubious sources. It messes with your mind because it fits the profile the indoctrination that you've received, but it doesn't play here, my brothers and sisters. We only speak truth. Nada más. Only the truth. So don't forget, if you're coming to politics done right, come with your opinions. But we are all going to come to the truth every single time. Let's see. Inflation, crime, immigration, hard for Dems to spin their way out of this disaster. It's amazing, right? It shouldn't be Democrats spinning themselves out of that disaster. It should actually be Republicans spinning themselves out of that disaster. Democrats, because we have too many neoliberals on board, are likely culprits in that domain. All right. Michael told Eric, what is the Republican Party plan? They have none at all. Let's see what else we got. Lee Grant says, give someone else a turn and see what happens. Current administration, it's that I had yours. 2 years is not enough at all. Not after the disaster that Trump created. Send off a masticator. I just joined a group in my community where we'll be going to disrupt, shut down drag queen shows for oh Lord. I don't know where you see that, but what can I say? Eric, fact, Egberto, you ran out of time. I don't know. We'll see. A lot of people are giving up. I see my people are actively trying to wake up others that are asleep or doesn't believe things are as crazy as they are. Bridge MCP says, Michael Rudd and Eric Hayes, what is the Republican Party economic plan? That's a repeat. Egberto, how about the fentanyl deaths and the morality south of 1,000 immigrants dying, 53 in one truck? Well, whose fault is that? Again, Republicans' fault. Create a policy, but we can't get a policy because of the filibuster. When we get rid of the filibuster, we can create a good immigration policy. Lee Grant says, high crime rate in Washington, D.C. itself is a wonderful example of Democratic policy. No, it's a wonderful example of socioeconomic angst. It shows you what when you have a large socioeconomically disadvantaged place, that is what you get. If you want an example, go to any crappy city in Appalachia, and you'll find relatively the same type of problems occurring. It's what occurs, and that's why also you have more crime in red states. They're poor. The red states are a bunch of poor folk on welfare because that's what their policies create. And where you have poverty, you have higher crime. So everything we preach on this program, Rudnin has said it several times, poverty and lead in water gives you high crime rates. And guess what you have in red states? A lot of poverty and lead in water. Come on. It's easy. This is not rocket science. So thank you for making a point. Bridge FCP said, Egberto, so weird Republicans come out with their game plan and the people here repeat it. I know. Let's see, Eric. I will speak truth. 200 dead via bonding. That's not via bonding. That is 200 people dead. Daniel Edo says, notice how the Democrats have become war hawks. They want more war in Ukraine. They are all on board with war with China over Taiwan. How did this happen? I think you missed the point. You're talking about neoliberals. Okay, we are not into war. In fact, the truth of the matter is, I don't want Russia to invade or attack Ukraine, but I want to tell you something. There's no love lost for Ukraine at politics done right, because Ukraine has not been like the holy, nice set of people that have great human rights. I'm sorry, that's not who they are. Now, there's a myth that's built around them, and the defense industrial conflicts would like that myth to continue so that we continue buying arms for them. But I understand the truth. All right, let's see. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, let's see. What time is it? 31. Let us go ahead and do video number 3. This one is truly we want to talk about Medicare versus Medicare Advantage. And the star of this show for that one is going to be our own Bridge MCP, who called into the radio show yesterday. So, Bridge, here you go, or beautiful.
Come on in. Bridge, how are you doing today?
Hi.
Talk to me.
Egberto?
Yes, it's Egberto.
It's Bridge MCP.
Hey, Bridge, how are you doing, my dear friend? Talk to me.
I'm good. I wanted to know if you would explain, because I get very confused. And I have to turn this down.
Turn it down so that we can, Go ahead.
Yeah. I was having a talk with my brother, and he was saying Medicare Advantage is just a private company like anybody else.
Yes, he's correct.
And I said, yes, that's correct, but it's not good. And for some reason, I couldn't think of an answer.
Let me give you the answer to that, okay? Medicare Advantage is just like having your regular standard insurance, private insurance right now, whether crappy as it is or good as it is, okay? If you want something good, you pay for it. The difference here is Medicaid Advantage is paid for by the government at a premium. In other words, Medicare Advantage costs the government more than standard Medicare, and the company companies that run the private companies that run Medicare Advantage ensures that the government will not provide dental, ears, and eyes within the cost of Medicare, the standard Medicare as it is. Now, here's an important factor here. There's some very, very important factors people have to understand. When you buy Medicare, you also need to purchase, or it is suggested that you also purchase something called Medigap. Medigap is private insurance to cover the part of insurance, the 20% that Medicare does not cover. But when you are originally signing up for Medicare, standard Medicare, those prices for the Medigap is controlled, and you cannot be placed into the market as far as whether you're sick before or not. If you sign up, if you decide to follow what you're watching on TV right now, and you sign up for standard Medicare Advantage, if you find out that you don't like the doctors for the plans that you have or for all these Medicare Advantage plans, and you decide that you want to go back to standard Medicare because standard Medicare allows you to go to any doctor. That's the difference between the private sector and the government sector in Medicare Advantage. In Medicare, the private sector running Medicare Advantage, they tell you what medicines you can take. They tell you what doctors you can see. They tell you what hospitals you can go to. Standard Medicare, you can do whatever your doctor says, whatever you want to do. But if you leave Medicare Advantage to come back to Medicare, standard Medicare, at that point, Medicare Advantage, Medigap will say, well, were you sick? And all these other things that if you were sick, you will either not get Medigap or have to pay a very high premium to get Medigap. Likewise, if you're just staying with standard Medicare, you don't get eye coverage for free. You don't get ears, eyes, and teeth for free. Here's a kicker. It may cost you a bit more standard Medicare than what you get from Medicare Advantage. But I always tell people it is important for you to ask the question, who gives you something for nothing? If you're on Medicare Advantage, and I'm not saying it's bad or whatever, it depends on, and you're locked in, remember that that's just what it is. You're locked in until the next year where you choose another plan that maybe is better for you, but you decide you want to go to Jamaica, you decide you want to go to Europe, you have some issues with that as well. Because again, only emergencies are covered. And I mean, so I don't have all the time to go into all the things, but my good friend, Tom Hartman, he wrote the book on healthcare that also includes some of the stuff we spoke about here. That is a must see for all our great seniors out there that are making that important choice now as to whether to go to the private sector for their health care or stick with a good run medical program that costs 2% in overhead versus over 30% plus theft in the Medicare Advantage field.
So if you go to your secondary, we're talking like Medicare Advantage is a secondary, then if you have somebody else, I don't know, I have NISHIP, and say I switch to, which I never would, but I switch to Medicare Advantage. Now, don't certain insurance companies like Humira have Medicare Advantage programs?
Yes, all of them and that's the thing. They all, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, because I've had to deal with this because I turned 65 recently.
Right.
And so I've been a couple of years jumping into how this all works. And so I went with regular Medicare and I got a little additional policy. So my Part D is I've got a little extra for prescription drugs. And then I've got the Medigap, which is another additional one that I pay for both of those.
Right.
And, it's over 150. Okay. Well, it's over $150 a month that I maybe wouldn't have to pay if I did a Medicare Advantage plan that replaced all of those. But as Egberto was saying, the Medicare Advantage has all these restrictions. One, the big one for me, my doctor that saved my life 20 years ago, he's not part of a Medicare Advantage plan. He says, we take regular Medicare and that's it. So if you switch to an Advantage plan, you're going to have to find a new doctor. It's like, well, geez, that's sort of, I don't like that limitation among many other limitations.
There's so many limitations.
So do you have to join, is Medigap part of Medicare or do you have to join it?
It's when you get Medicare, you have a window of time where you get a supplemental benefit insurance plan, and it's mandated through the government if you do it during the window that you have, that it doesn't have any of those testing requirements built into it. If you left and did an Advantage and came back, then you'd have to go through basically qualifying examinations and things like that. You would find that maybe you're being restricted out. Maybe a pre-existing condition would raise your supplemental rate more high than you'd be willing to pay, and it would leave you in a bit of a lurch.
So I had regular medical insurance, and when I went out in disability, I got Medicare, and my regular insurance automatically became my secondary.
Right.
So I guess I was not in Medigap.
No, that's not that is because you came into the Medicare via disability, which is a different story. Different story. But here's the deal: when you are going to be on Medicare only, because I think eventually you would be, that is what's going to be covering you. I can't give advice officially, but we've just given you all the caveats that there are if you decide to go with Medicare Advantage versus. But hold 1 second. I want to ask our listeners one more time, folks. 713-526-5738. I want to give a big thank you to Jeanette. Very big thank you. Please, folks, we need some more calls. 713-526-5738, 713-526-5738, or go to kpft.org to support this station. And by the way, by having Bridge MCP call us here, think about that. How many people have learned about Medicare because there's a KPFT that's willing to tell the truth, because none of those companies that are doing Medicare Advantage are here to advertise on KPFT. Because why, Dwayne? We are what kind of station again?
We are the People's Radio station.
We are the People's Radio.
Hey, and here's a tip. I would maybe share this with you as well. There's an organization called Healthcare for All Texas.
Yes.
I've always called them HCFAT. HCFAT, Healthcare for All Texas.
That sounds like Dwayne, man.
So look up HCFAT. Google them, and that will maybe take you down a couple of information avenues that provides a lot of great help.
In fact, some of our donors right here at Bridge MCP are some of the are on the board of not the board, but they really organize with that company. So it's a good one to look at. But so tell your brother and tell your brother, if he wants to have a conversation here on KPFT or anything, we love the conversation, because we're not about fighting about stuff. We're about talking about stuff, as you well know.
Well, he had somebody come to the house, and he just switched over because that's the window.
Right.
So he just switched over to Humira or something. But I wanted to give him more information, but I forgot about Tom Hartman.
Yes.
I was looking up some of your stories, and I was like, where did he talk about this?
Yeah. Well, in fact, Bridge, I interviewed Tom Hartman twice on this subject, actually.
I know, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll talk about it. But look, my dear, beautiful lady, thank you so kindly for giving us a call.
Thank you.
And see you at 3.
Shout out to Ashley.
All right.
Anyway, that was fun having Bridge call, because, again, think about how many people learned so much just from that conversation that Bridge started. Haiku 333, welcome to Politics Done Right. Biden hasn't changed any border policies from Trump, except he is not ripping families apart. Great point. Let's see what else we have here. We have Lee Grant, or rather, Michael to Lee Grant says, you know what's funny? Used to be conservatives who kept talking about leftists as Russian communists, while we were also talking about Scandinavian democratic socialism. And now you are saying leftists are saying Putin's has to go, while the rest of us recognize that a destabilized Russia would likely put some of their nuclear arsenal sold in terrorist hands. It's quite the funny contradiction. I mean, the thing about the conservative movement has never been an honest movement. And in not being an honest movement, you can just expect the fraud on the truth, which is what you get, lies. Fraud on the truth. You get lies. Now, there's a good, interesting thing that Eric put out here that I want to read, because it drives me crazy, anybody that tries to create these sort of programs. He says, Bridge MCP, Medishare, established in 1993 under Christian Care Ministry. Medishare is a 501c3 that is trusted by almost 500,000 Americans to take care of their health care needs instead of meeting a deductible and paying monthly premiums to a corporate institution. Medishare members meet an annual household portion and pay a monthly share. Eligible medical bills are shared by members who also encourage and pray for one another. Medishare works on behalf of Medishare work on behalf of members to negotiate discounts and facilitate direct thing. You can create any kind of thing like this, right? Here's the problem. Let's just use my own situation. I've had medical insurance from the time I got to this country. Never stopped. From the time I was at the University of Texas, I've had the University of Texas health insurance. To the corporations that I've worked for, I've had the corporation's insurance. And when I formed my own company over 30 years ago, likewise, I had my own personal insurance for the whole family. And that insurance eventually was costing us over $15,000 or $16,000 with a $10,000 deductible, which means our insurance bill could be as high as over $26,000, $28,000 a year. Okay? That's just our medical expense, even with insurance. Most people couldn't do it, and now I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it now. My wife decided to so that we could get insurance as opposed to the insurance that was just sucked everything out of us. She decided, in order for me to be able to continue doing this, to go ahead and work for the district, et cetera, so that we have fairly good insurance through the district. Now, the problem about it is this. Most people don't get that. And there are a lot of gimmicks out there. Even Medishare, I call a gimmick. And I'm very familiar with other programs like Medishare. We try to get some of them at KPFT. They don't work for one reason. If you have lupus, like my wife does, if you have brain AVM like my daughter had that created a stroke that created likely hundreds of thousands of dollars in a bill for one person because of a fraudulent medical system, it won't work because you would drain that particular system. The only solution to our health care problem is health care for all, where we pay our health care out of the general funds, and we eliminate the 30 or so % thievery out of healthcare. And actually, it's probably more than 30% thievery out of healthcare. It's important. It is important for us to get rid of the private sector in health insurance, the private sector, and start paying for doctors to go to college and have them pay back in kind. And then they can, after they paid back in kind, they can do whatever they want. We have to be innovative. But the private sector is a fraud in the healthcare system. And if you doubt it, look at their profits and look at their expenditure for healthcare versus expenditure for CEOs, shareholders, and all these other guys. It's a fraud. And those of you on the right, until you get it, you are hurting not only yourselves and the rest of America, you're hurting your country. There's no debate about that. None. Bridge says Egberto Willis found out that most insurance companies, secondary insurance, have mail-in drugs, which can be at times 80% cheaper. We use that. Linda uses, because she is on a permanent regimen of drugs, she does it mail order, and that comes in. Now, let me tell you what's even sometimes can work out cheaper to just show you that the system is a fraud. GoodRx. You can go to CVS and not knowing about GoodRx, you go ahead and say you pay $50 for a prescription. And then you go ahead and say, oh, let me look at GoodRx. And then you look at GoodRx and that same $50 prescription costs you $3. Again, it's the insurance company and our healthcare system. It's a fraud. If you are up to speed, if you have a phone and if you have the ability to negotiate, etc., it can be a little less expensive. But my God, for those who are not schooled, for those who, it's a fraudulent system. It's a failure. All right, folks, let's do our last video now with this Congresswoman that I simply love. Let's go ahead and talk to Katie. I wish we could mint California Representative Katie Porter because she's in a difficult district, Orange County, in California, and she wins, right? She's in a difficult race right now. She wins. But what is she doing? She's engaging her community more like very few do. What I love that she's doing is, first, she teaches people how to vote. In California, there's mail-in vote. She teaches them how to send in your mail-in votes. Perfectly done. What else does she do? She goes ahead and she makes the economic case. Look, the abortion case, all these other cases with respect to a woman's reproductive life, it's being made over and over again, and she makes it as well. But she understands something very important. You have to neutralize Republicans in order to get your entire message across. And if you listen to how she addressed all of this with O'Donnell, you see how I think if every congressperson did it this way, in easier districts than she has, they would be successful. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Early voting is officially underway in 40 states. In California, over 1.5 million mail-in ballots have already been sent. Our next guest, Democratic Representative Katie Porter, is seeking re-election to Congress, this time from California's newly drawn 47th district. Last week, Representative Katie Porter showed how easy it is to vote in California.
I'm Katie Porter, and I represent Orange County in Congress. There's an election on November 8th. Let me show you how simple it is to vote here in California. All registered voters were sent a ballot through the mail. It's so important we make our voices heard in this election. Control of the House and Senate are at stake, and that means abortion rights, climate action, gun violence prevention, and accountability are on the ballot. Once you've cast your vote, seal and sign the envelope. I'm headed to my nearest drop box, which is about 5 minutes from my house, to drop off my ballot. Orange County voters can find drop box locations at ocvote.gov. You can also send your ballot back through the mail. No stamps needed.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to begin with the bigger question of what does it mean to the country on which party controls the House of Representatives next year after this election?
Well, the stakes are incredibly high. They're high for women's reproductive freedom, for abortion rights. They're high for our climate crisis, but they're also high for issues that maybe aren't getting as much attention, including the future of Social Security and Medicare, programs that all working Americans rely on.
I have the ballot that you just showed. I have it at home on the kitchen table. I always know what I'm going to do in the big offices. But that ballot, as you know, goes down into the state legislative offices. In California, it has judges. Not all states elect judges, but California does. And many of us get a little lost the farther down that ballot we go. How important is it when we're reaching down there below the federal offices to vote for those state legislative offices?
It's incredibly important to vote down the ballot because to solve most of the problems that Americans care about, including problems like the climate crisis, health care, housing affordability, we have to have the right leaders at the federal, state, county, and local level. And I think there were a lot of moments during the pandemic that really showed that, where we provided funds to states and counties, they could invest those resources in helping to address things like hunger, making sure that we could keep firefighters and law enforcement working. So we have to have the right partners. Climate change is, for example, is not something you can solve at any one level of government.
Talk about the inflation, which all polls are showing is the number one issue that's on swing voters' minds.
Well, voters don't like getting cheated and they don't like getting lied to. And that's what's happening right now. They're getting price gouged, getting overcharged at the grocery store, at the pump for so many goods and services. And then corporations are telling them, oh, it's a supply chain issue. Oh, it's not our fault. But the proof's in the pudding. About half of what we're seeing in corporate profit margins right now is coming from those boosts to the bottom line. So about half of the inflationary effect is coming from corporate profit margins, and the other half is the added cost of input or the added cost of labor. And so I think Americans sense this. They're filling up at the pump and seeing prices go up and down. We have CEOs saying on earnings calls, CEOs of multinational global corporations saying on earnings calls things like, quote, a little bit of inflation is good because it lets them raise their prices.
According to this chart, what is the biggest driver of inflation during the pandemic? The dark blue is the recent period.
It would be corporate profits.
And what is that percentage?
It is 54%, and that number does stay that level of high if you update that number to more recent numbers as well.
So over half of the increased prices people are paying are coming from increases in corporate profits.
Yes, the unit price index is reflected in corporate profits as opposed to other costs.
What do your colleagues say when you make these points? You make them in a way that it seems translatable to the campaign arena. Or do your colleagues use some of these points the way you describe them?
Well, I certainly hope so, because look, voters want to hear about it. They're going to the grocery store. I'm going to the grocery store. We're filling up our gas tanks. We're trying to purchase things. So it's on voters' minds, and you just need to tackle it straight up and have the courage to stand up to big corporations and tell the truth. They are cheating us, and we're all paying the price. Our overall economy is paying the price. Nobody more so, by the way, than our seniors who are on fixed incomes and retirees. They want to see someone who will protect Social Security and Medicare and stand up to corporations who are making it hard for them to take care of themselves in their later years.
Republicans, if they had said something that in any way is related to inflation as a point they're making on the campaign trail, I would raise it to you now, and I would challenge you with it now. But they have not. There is not one anti-inflation proposal that Republicans have. They have a giant tax cut proposal, which is not anti-inflationary in any way. They seem to be interested in going back to a world in which there's absolutely no inhibitions on prescription drug prices, which is, in fact, inflationary. What do you say when voters say to you, we want to switch to Republicans because of inflation?
They get that Republicans are playing the blame game. But what they want to hear from Democrats is that we are on top of this and we are willing to fight to do something about it. So Republicans are simply pointing fingers at Democrats, but Democrats need to come back to voters and say, they're just pointing fingers. We have solutions. We see the issues. We see the challenges. Here's what we've done, and we know there's more to do. You can trust us to do it.
This is one of the reasons why I so love Katie Porter, because she's a very complex woman. She understands the complexity of the economy, women issues, environmental issues, and all the issues that concerns not only progressives, but all Americans. But most importantly, she knows how to put this message in a bread and butter form, a form that every American can understand. So folks, 12 days left. Take Katie Porter's lead. Put the case onto the Republicans as it should. Has done a great job here on the economic message. There's also other messaging that must be done in the crime arena, where it is that Republicans don't know how to solve crimes because it is they who are the genesis of the increase in violent crimes with their gun policies. And if you need any illustration on that, check out the 5 states with the worst case of murder, or red states. The 8 of the 10 states with the highest crime rate, red states. All of that is indicative that they don't know what they're doing. And if they want to impart on America what they've imparted on the parts of the country they are running, then that is not what Americans want, and that needs to be taken care of now. Absolutamente sí. And it is, Bridge MCP. Old lives matter. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Kat Liddon says, please do not show the border problem. It is not Biden's problem. It's 30, 40-year-old problem. What realistic solution is there? I mean, the solution starts with us doing not pilfering the Latin American and Caribbean countries by giving them their due and not just exploiting them. Exploitation means there's less money. You know, there are two groups of folks that exploit the Central Americans, the Latin Americans, and the Caribbeans, and that is the corporations and the plutocracy in those respective countries. So, I mean, again, what we have to do is ensure that we get fairness. And I guarantee you, Brother West, there will not be a red wave. In fact, I am still holding on to retaining Congress and retaining the Senate. But we'll see. We'll see how right the polls are. We'll definitely see. I mean, every time you come down to this time in the Congress, people start to get scared. I am not scared at all. Look, guys, I forgot to do my ask today, but that's okay. I'm going to just put some links in there and ask you to please support the program. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal to support us on PayPal. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. We do need some patrons. So go to politicsdoneright.com/Patreon to support us on Patreon. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube or just click the join button. If you're listening to us on YouTube, just click that join button. Become a part of the fund. Politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Also, you can shop at our store. We can get T-shirts. You can get hoodies. You can get our hats, all that kind of stuff at our store. politicsdoneright.com/store. You can also go get our books, all those books that you see on the screen that I advertise throughout the show. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/books to get all our books. Politicsdoneright.com/support has all our support options, different options to support the program. And please don't forget to check out you can subscribe to our new podcast. It's actually all our videos, all our MP3s, all of that in one location that you can actually listen to on podcasts at Spotify. You can subscribe to that. It's inexpensive. politicsdoneright.com/podcast paid. That's with politicsdoneright.com/podcast paid. And of course, check out my new book. I have new chapters for many of you. politicsdoneright.com/tribulations. It stands for the tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean man. So please go ahead and check it out. politicsdoneright.com/tribulations. I am sure you will enjoy that new book, which is done in a serious fashion. If you go to that, guess what? Amazon is giving you free tokens to read just about all the chapters that are there already. So if you don't have a Amazon account, just go ahead and create an Amazon account, and you'll get the tokens to read read it, and that'll help us as well to fund what we're doing here. Very, very important that we get this done. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you guys for, let's see, defunding was a bad choice of words, and they did nothing to change it, so they use it against us. I agree with you. Even though as the thing just showed, the video just showed you, in the top 25 cities, the top red 25 cities and the top blue 25 cities, the blue cities on a per capita basis have their 75% more police. Think about that. So while they talk about defund the police, it is their police who are defunded, and it's understandable. They don't like to spend money on people. Their crime rate is higher. It is understandable. Crime tracks poverty, and they are poor by choice. It is understandable. I don't know how much more people have to see the failure of the conservative mantra. But anyhow, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willis. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to hear your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, like mainstream media, beholden to corporations, we only allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.